Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very, very special edition of the NewEveningIsle.com conversation series, where I have sort of branched out of my specialty, and we are talking to a very, very special, very, very philanthropic guest around a lifelong passion of mine, which is blue whales and how we can preserve them as a species. So we have wonderful, evocative Michael Fischbach, who is one of the most compelling voices in contemporary marine conservation, a deeply committed advocate whose work bridges scientific inquiry and also storytelling and even direct ecological and biological intervention, and is a co-founder of the Great Whale Conservatory and has been at the forefront of efforts to protect some of the world's most vulnerable species, particularly large baleen whales, that are threatened by entanglement, ship strikes, and environmental degradation. Fischbach's work is also grounded in real-world encounters, most notably his role in the rescue of a severely entangled humpback whale, an experience that has informed both his conservation philosophy and public outreach through expeditions, documentation, and education. He has helped bring global attention to the urgent realities facing marine ecosystems, translating complex environmental issues into deeply human and emotionally resonant narratives. He collaborates with scientists, policymakers, and fellow conservationists across, interdisciplinary, contributing to a growing movement that recognizes whales not only as a keystone species, but as vital participants in the health of the planet and even our survival. His talks and appearances resonate widely, drawing in audiences who may not have previously considered the scale or significance of ocean conservation. So for anyone interested in furthering the work, I highly recommend going to the Great Whale Conservatory's website. And I just want to warmly welcome you, Michael Fischbach. So I know you're a busy man living an international lifestyle. So thank you so much for giving up your time here.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here. And just one little correction, it's the Great Whale Conservancy.
Conservancy, you're right.
Great Whale Conservancy and our Whale Guardians program as well. So it's two programs, but Great Whale Conservancy.org.
Conservancy.
That's our place.
Conservancy. All right. Thank you for that. Now, I actually feel, as odd as this sounds, I feel it's important to introduce myself in this topic because one thing I hate it when what podcasters do, especially the more influential podcasters, is branch out to fields that have nothing to do with them just for the sake of appearing more widely accomplished or more intellectually accomplished than they actually are. And I am telling you that this is not that. This is not one of those things. Blue whales, baleen whales, rorqual whales are a deep-seated fascination and subject of awe for me and have been for well over 10 years. And it started for me when I was 14 years old, when I snorkeled at the Georgia Aquarium, which I know is no substitute for the ocean. But when a 23-foot juvenile whale shark glided past me, and I looked right into its eyes, and if I've ever felt the overview effect that astronauts feel, upon seeing the Earth as a ball and returning to Earth with a very strong opposition to war and sense of scarcity, it was that moment. I realized it was my ultimate ground of reality. We don't need to keep writing these amazing novels. We don't need to keep going down this Tolkien road of creating amazing creatures. They're already out there. There's plenty of them, even today. And around that same time, I came across a photograph that changed my life. I'm sure, Michael, you've seen this photograph before, but a lot of people haven't, especially when they're young. When I was getting into photography, and I came across a photograph by the Swiss photographer Franco Banfi among photographing blue whales in Sri Lanka. I came across this image that I'm sure you're familiar with. That changed my life. It's my favorite oceanic photograph of all time, and it's the subject of documentaries and books that directly derive it, and we just have not been able to duplicate something like that. And it was that beauty that kind of saved the whales for me. And now with further correspondence with people like Franco Banfi, doing an article interview with him last year, and with furthering my education around this, I feel it's all the right time to be talking all about this fascinating animal. So the blue whale goes by the Greek Latin name Balaenoptera musculus, which means a very large whale with wings, ptera meaning wings, pterodactyl. due to the family that blue whales belong to, which are known as rorquals, having very large, comparatively large pectoral fins. Um, but there's just so many mysteries around this animal, and I am so grateful that we have one of the world's leading experts on this. So, onto the early and personal relations to this animal. So, you've spent so much of your life in close proximity to these largely inaccessible creatures. Can you trace the earliest moment where a whale, or just the image of a whale, shifted from being some sort of abstract animal you learned about in school to something you felt had a deeper significance? What is it about whales fundamentally that's worth dedicating your entire career to?
Well, I think the awe and the mystery of the whale is what got me started. That happened up in Quebec, Canada, in the St. Lawrence River. I was living in Vermont at the time and began my experience or my encounters with whales up in the St. Lawrence River, actually, and Maui, because I worked in Hawaii and Maui on a humpback whale research project at about the same time that I first encountered them in Canada. And my background is not a scientific background. It's not actually even an institutional educational background because I was a professional athlete when I was younger. So I forego even getting a college degree. I went to university, but I didn't stay. I became a professional athlete before I was done. And I think just to carry this on, the thing that has kept me with the whales, that's what got me to the whales in the beginning, the awe and the mystery of these incredible animals that I had not grown up with. The thing that's kept me there is understanding their plight, their historical decimation, and their absolutely critical relevance to the health of the oceanic ecosystem, which is what keeps us alive on this planet. If the ocean dies, we're gone.
Yeah, we will talk more about that later because you did elucidate on a process of phytoplankton positively impacting the air we breathe, which we will get into that at the end because I think that's I'll save the best for last. So before whales became a regular part of your life, what did they represent to you and how has that shifted over the years?
Well, I think I was not a person that was extremely knowledgeable on the ocean growing up. Not that I hadn't been on the ocean, not that I hadn't swam in the ocean, and not that I hadn't snorkeled in the ocean, but whales were an abstract bit of awe, the biggest animals on the planet, and living in an ocean that was not really a big part of my life growing up. And I just think that they remained a sort of an abstract mystery until I met them.
Mhm. And did you have kind of like my experience and like sort of a lot of people who certainly people who work in this field, were there any early encounters in particular? I'm talking like early on that kind of did redirect your sense of, your sense of urgency of protecting this animal?
I think, I think all the encounters, I mean, I definitely can think of some unusual ones that happened. In the early years, I was captaining a research panga in Canada and had a humpback whale go upside down and actually lift our inflatable. It was a hard-hulled inflatable, lifted up in the air on its belly very gently, and then put us down very gently, just looking at its pectoral fins sticking out on each side of the boat. I mean, that was certainly one of those wow moments. There have been many more, but I think in general, more than that encounter or any one encounter, it's all of them. It's seeing many fin whales next to each other, seeing my first blue whales, seeing humpbacks jump up in the air, seeing my first sperm whales, the largest brained animal in the history of the planet. Just seeing the ocean in general, seeing even the dolphins and the porpoises and the seals and the sea turtles, just seeing the mystery of it all, because most all of them disappear below the surface pretty soon after you see them. So the mystery is a larger part of their life than what you actually get to see.
So in more simple words, there's still more that we don't know about them than we do.
Well, just consider it this way. We may be able to name a whale, We may be able to know the sex of a whale. Let's talk about a blue whale. We may be able to follow its life history by photographically identifying it, or a few months of its travel by putting an implant satellite tag in it. We may see who it associates with and where it goes and where it comes back to. But we can't ask it a question. What's really going on in there? What really makes you tick? What historical knowledge were you born with? What do you do that's relevant to communication you're receiving now from your fellow kind or the ocean in general? And what of is historically implanted in you when you're born? How far do you communicate with your kind? What fears do you have? What joys do you have? No expert in the world can get on any interview or podcast and give you conclusive answers to those questions. So ultimately, we don't really know who these animals are. We just know a number of things about them. We don't know what makes them tick. We don't know about their spirit. We don't know about their soul. We don't know about their intelligence. We know, for example, that blue whales are the perfect giants and that they live at one with their ocean home. They figured it out. They've been around a long time. But who are they really? Don't know. Don't know if we'll ever know.
Mhm. Yeah. So, and upon your conclusion that it was not really a single event, a single R transformation, it was all of them. It's everything you've had put together. But you did mention one of them being the first time you've ever seen a blue whale. Can you kind of elucidate on what that was like? Where were you geographically? What was?
I was in the St. Lawrence River of Quebec, and in fact, my experience with blue whales, which I didn't even know were still alive when I was younger. I knew they were the biggest animals that ever lived, but like a lot of people 40 years ago and more, I thought that they were extinct. I didn't think that they were with us anymore. And they came pretty close to becoming extinct, um, too close, in fact. So my first encounter with a blue whale was, in fact, I didn't know it was a blue whale. I thought it was a fin whale, which is the second largest animal in the world, because they live in the same waters in the St. Lawrence where I was working. And I was working with far more seasoned biologists than I was. Two female Quebecois biologists on the boat that I was driving, and I didn't really have a great view of the whale because they were sort of blocking my view. So I hate to quash any excitement that anyone have might have or envision for my first sighting of a blue whale, but it really wasn't very exciting at all because I didn't even know it was a blue whale until I was told afterwards.
Mhm. If I remember correctly, especially at the height of finning, when we were culling whales at an almost industrial scale, I've read that it got so bad that fin whales and blue whales actually did try reproducing.
Well, I would not comment to the veracity or the truth of that having anything to do with whaling. They still do mate. They still do court, and there are known hybrid offspring that exist. I have seen them. I have photographed them. I have spent time with a few of them. They have been genetically proven to be hybrid blue whale fin whales. And the interesting thing is, to the best of my knowledge, and I'd have to go back to the literature, but I'm pretty sure that some of them have been proven to be viable, um, meaning that they can reproduce. And if you look at the actual definition of hybrid, if fin whales and blue whales can mate and produce an offspring, and that offspring is viable, then technically, I believe that fin whales and blue whales are not a separate species because that should not be possible with two different species. But my scientific expertise has its limitations. So, again, before anyone takes that to the bank, I suggest looking up the literature. And I think that's what you'll find is that, but no question that fin whales and blue whales have reproduced and produced offspring.
Mhm. So on to our
Still, that is still to this day
ongoing.
ongoing.
Hmm. Yeah, and they're being caught too, from what I've heard, and it's awful. So now to our next topic,
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean by caught?
um, in places where whaling is still happening, there.
Yeah. I'm very rarely for blue whales. It's a real taboo. It has happened, unfortunately, in the past few years, a little bit. For fin whales, definitely more, and that's a tragedy. And that takes place in very few nations in the world are involved in that. And, there's definitely ongoing battles to stop that. But that is not their main problem today. That is not the main primary problem that they face, whaling. It's much more ship strikes, number one for the large whales, entanglements, number two, and then certainly the degradation of the ocean and the acoustical pollution in the ocean, as well as the physical pollution, are problems, definitely as well.
So, um, on to our next topic, which is being in the presence of a blue whale. Now, an interesting uh, conclusion that I've deduced from talking to the few people that I've been able to talk to who have been in the presence of one. Um, it's a little what's funny about it about people talking about being around blue whales in particular that species is the turning point for me was being in the presence of a whale shark. But they've all said pretty much all of them they said that you don't really get in the presence of a blue whale. Blue whales are very, very motion centric animals. They're constantly moving. There's not really a moment where they stop to check you out or to check what instrumentation you're using, a boat or whatever is checking out. It's just a very quick, they all describe it as a very quick, powerful, swift for a few seconds, and then that's it. And and they also talk about it being very quiet, which is which it shouldn't be. It should be straight out of a novel that there is a place on Earth where an animal that weighs 250,000 pounds can actually sneak up on you out of nowhere. But it is. Do you find that to be consistent with your time around blue whales, or have you had your time, being in the
Oh,
presence?
okay. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, I can understand certain people saying that, but you won't hear that description as being the guarantee when you talk to people that have seen as many blue whales as I have, or others that have potentially seen more. I have had many thousands of encounters with individual blue whales, including if we had spoken yesterday, it would still be March. Okay. In the month of March, last month, it's now April 1st. I've probably had 250 encounters with blue whales in the month of March during my annual research that I do in Baja California, Mexico. And I will tell you that a lot of times, the majority of the time when you see a blue whale, it doesn't pay attention to you. It's in its own world, presumably. And the interaction is one of being an observer to an awesome animal. It can sneak up on you, yes, but not when it spouts. I mean, because it sounds like a small bomb has gone off when a blue whale exhales. It's very, very loud and powerful when you're near to it. And as far as blue whales uh, just sort of moving along. I mean, that really depends on what the whales are doing and where you're seeing them, because in some instances they're feeding, and you can spend an hour with a blue whale and it pretty much never goes anywhere. It just comes up and with a mouthful of food or a belly full of food, expels the water through the baleen plate, swallows, and goes down and gets more krill, if the krill is present, which is about 99% of a blue whale's diet. And then there are other times that blue whales will socialize. I have seen that. I've seen 10 to 12 blue whales in an area for an hour to an hour and a half, not really doing anything, just just milling around and not going anywhere or doing anything in particular. And I think, the key there is what's happening underneath the surface when they dive. And then you've got mothers and calves, and you have occasionally times where males will be battling for access to a receptive female. So you have the whole gamut. You have juveniles that can be curious. They can swim up to your boat. They can swim around your boat. They can literally just about invite you into the water to swim with them. But the norm is adults that go about their business that are massive and don't pay a lot of attention to you. That's the norm with blue whales.
And I'm open to being, wrong at any time. And this is just my scientific questioning, my scientific, I say that, but just my machinations. Does it also depend? And, it definitely seems that you've had enough of interactions to have an answer on this. Does it also depend on what population you're interacting with that dictates the depth of it? Like, are some populations like the Antarctic more evasive than the ones on the West Coast?
Well, I mean, I don't think that we can compare the Antarctic population to the west coast of North America or what we call the Eastern North Pacific population, which is really, in a lot of ways, centered in Mexico. We talk about the west coast of the U.S. because we're from here, but that population, I think, is really centered in Mexico more than it is in the United States. Because in the United States, they're here seasonally. In Mexico, they're there year round. So in Antarctica, it's tough to find them. And why is it tough to find them? Because for 7 months of the year, no one's going to be there, number one. And for the 5 months of the year that someone is going to be there, it's not so easy to just get around and go where you want to go and say, oh, I'm going to take 5 days off because I'm not feeling well, and then I'll go back out on the water. You're there on an expedition that was very challenging to get down there in the first place. It's very expensive to be there. It's not going to stay there for that long, and then it's going to leave. And if you're a biologist, you'll use acoustics to try to find them. But again, it's a wild and woolly part of the world. And although you may hear them because the sound can be heard over long distances, it's not that easy to find them. So I think more than taking one subpopulation to another and talk about behavior being different, I think it's when you meet the individuals in that subpopulation, what time of the year are you meeting them? What is the primary activity? Is it a feeding ground? Are they moving between feeding grounds? Are there calves around? Is it time to court and mate? Is there a little bit more socializing going on? I think these things are more relevant than where you see them in the world. But I will add that blue whales never veer far away from feeding. Food is the big thing that drives what they do. And they never spend very much time in their lives not feeding or not moving from one feeding ground that kind of breaks down to another one that's about to erupt with food. They are very big and their food is very small and they need to constantly feed themselves.
Mhm. And that just adds, in my case, to the poetry of this animal and why it's why I find it very easy to deduce that it's the most beautiful animal on the planet today. I mean, it's the largest, yet it's has absolutely no record of attacking humans, even on accident. It can't even accidentally eat you. A whale's esophagus can
Yeah.
choke on a loaf of bread. They can't act, yeah. So, you hear fables about that, and then you find out that's totally wrong. And just adds to it just the harmlessness of it.
No, no, I'm just going to agree. There's no known instance of a blue whale ever intentionally harming a human being, certainly never killing one. There are a couple instances of boats that are not behaving in a way that they should be behaving. In other words, just flying through an area where blue whales are feeding, and blue whales surface and unintentionally hit a boat that's coming by. And I do know of two instances where a boat has actually been flipped over and people have been launched out, and there's been some injuries. But that's the human's fault, as you know, as one we would expect as we get to know a little bit more about humans. We would expect it to be the human's fault.
Yeah.
The egotistical, arrogant human's fault.
Hmm. And of course, to an egotistical, arrogant human, it's not their fault in here.
Of course, of
Yeah.
course.
Eh,
Yeah, yeah.
and so, and a blue whale tipped the boat, or was it another Baleen whale? Or
No, it has happened with other whales, but these are two instances that I know that have happened with blue whales, one in California and one in Mexico.
Mhm. And when you're around blue whales, either sporadically or on a routine basis, what impact does that have on you? You know, psychologically or
I think really one of the main impacts that it has on me is to be around animals that are so big and feel so safe. Because I feel safer around blue whales than I do around almost any other animal of size. I mean, obviously, little tiny animals, if they're not mosquitoes, because mosquitoes can be very dangerous depending on where you are in the world. Um, uh, any other significantly sized animal, there isn't one that I feel safer around than blue whales. I just feel completely at ease, other than the work that I need to accomplish. For example, if we're doing photo IDs of blue whales to maneuver a boat in position to get that. But as far as the comfort of being around, I mean, it's just 3 weeks ago, I was around 10 to 12 blue whales on a number of occasions, all within a few hundred meters of my boat. And there's just a total, I mean, I have to be careful if I'm moving that one doesn't pop up right in front of the boat. I look for that. But no, no, no. Just the primary thing I feel is comfort and awe. And we have to mention when we talk about the beauty of the blue whale, the patterning of its skin, the pigmentation of its skin, because it is remarkable. And any of your listeners that are interested and are interested enough to still be here listening to us talk should get on the internet and look at a few pictures of blue whales taken in good light from the side of their body so you can see this remarkable, unique set of pigmentation patterns that each individual has. It's really gorgeous.
and on that topic, something I personally wanted to ask you is one of your greatest efforts for your time of blue whale conservation was constructing this 85-foot long, I believe it was 85-foot
Yeah.
inflatable blue whale that you actually toured, if I remember right. You toured it across the United
Yeah.
States.
Yeah.
And what's blew my mind about it when I was listening to your TED talk, is that was modeled after a real female specimen.
Yeah, that was modeled after a female that we have seen in down in Mexico in 2009, 2011, and 2017. Those are the only 3 years that we've seen that individual. And she is a female in 2000. Which year? I'm trying to remember which year. We've seen her with a calf. I can't remember. No, only one of those years. And I think it was 2017 that she was with a calf. The reason that we modeled the inflatable well after this individual is she is one of the only blue whales that I have ever seen in my life. And I've seen a lot of blue whales that has spent hours surfacing from her dives and approaching our boat to visit us, clearly with us stopped. Just she'll come up and she'll swim over to the boat. And she has not done that all 3 of those years. But one year she did it every time we saw her. There was a point where we spent 2.5 hours sitting there and watching an adult blue whale disappear for 8 to 10 minutes in her dive, come up, and every time she came up, she swam right over to our boat, swam right next to our boat, did a pass by in slow motion, and back down again to do her business, which was probably feeding.
And geographically, where was this again?
This was off the east coast of Baja California in the Gulf of California or the Sea of Cortez. And it was just absolutely amazing. I'll never forget it. So we named her Star because she was the star of that year's research because of her behavior. And then we honored the her with the inflatable whale, including scarring, because I have hundreds of pictures of this individual. We patterned her pigmentation and her scars and everything to what she actually looks like.
And when this female was, going in very close proximity with the boat on the surface, did they have the calf with her when they were doing this?
No, no, that wasn't a year that she had a calf.
Okay.
That
Okay.
was
Okay.
that was I think that was 2009, and we saw her with a calf in 2017.
Mhm. So it was doing kind of like what gray whales do, which is very inquisitively
Yeah.
inspecting humans on the surface. And
Oh
then,
yeah, I mean, there's no coincidence in the fact that she swam over to the boat, slowed down, went next to the boat, went in front of the boat, um, but then she didn't ever stop. She didn't ever pop her eye out of the water. She didn't pop her head out of the water. She just came by and as someone involved in science, I shouldn't say this conclusively, but I'm going to say it anyway. She came over inquisitively to visit us. There's not any question about it. It just happened too many times in a row without us approaching her for too long of a time to have any other conclusion. Because she could have surfaced and gone in any direction. There were no other boats within probably 10 miles of us. We were completely alone.
this may sound kind of corny, but it's my genuine feelings about this. So we can, from your time, and I know you preface that you can't say it with like an academic authority, but we know that the whale is sort of, pondering, it's asking questions, what is this? What is this instrument? We just, as you said in the beginning, we can never get an answer out of a blue whale. It's weird. We've
No, it's it would be you want to know what's going on in the ocean. You want to know what's going on with the food. You want to know what's really going on about blue whales. Well, you can get the leading experts in the world to give you an hour's presentation on blue whales with all of their data, all of their pictures, all of their experiences. I'm one of them, but there are some that are, beyond me in their experience and their knowledge. But they can't tell you what is actually going on with the whale. They can't, none of them can get up there and really give you an insight to what the whale is as a being, and what it thinks about and what it's doing. We surmise, of course, that there are certain things we can presume. They're surface things. Well, blue whales, manage to get themselves fed, and they manage to migrate, and they manage to mate and have calves, and they manage to not, hit things. They manage to not get entangled in nets. When I say they manage to not hit things, that's not true because they do get hit by ships. They are susceptible to that. They're not very susceptible to getting stuck in nets. Why are they not susceptible to getting stuck in nets like humpback whales and fin whales and other species? Who can tell us why? Only a blue whale. Only a blue whale. We can surmise certain things. They communicate, they find each other, they find their food, they know how to mate, they know how to take care of their young and suckle them. They know a lot of things, but what's really going on in there? That's that is a beautiful mystery. And as far as I'm concerned, it's far more important to protect them and allow them to live into the future than to worry about knowing those things. What really is a blue whale and what really is going on in there? Well, yeah, I'd like to know too, but I'd rather just protect them and make sure that they have a future on this planet than know that.
Mhm. That all reminds me of what the statistician George Bach said. All models are wrong, but some are useful.
Yeah.
We can have sort of a uh, we could have sort of a phenotype. I'm using metaphorically. We could have sort of a phenotype of what we assume is going on with the lives of blue whales, but we don't have the real bare bones of, like, we don't have the empiricism of it.
Only a blue whale can give it to us, in my opinion. I don't think humans are ever gonna be able to extract that out of an animal that they can't communicate with directly.
Yeah. And one of the most fascinating, and I think one of the most important aspects, I actually think it's, especially among the general public, I actually think it's underestimated just how little known the blue whale is. I mean, when people Google a blue whale, you're not gonna, you actually don't find many pictures of blue whales. You find humpback whales, you find other people in the rorquals,
Yeah.
but you're not gonna find, people will not take the extra time to show you a genuine photograph of, you know, the Western population and especially the Antarctic, and that leads me to the next topic, which I think this is where the special interest of this species is needed most, which is to talk about the Antarctic blue whale population, as they are by far the largest population, um, and they are by far the most endangered. Um,
Were the largest.
were
Were. Yes, we get into that. Finish your question.
okay. Um, there was the most heavily damaged by commercial whaling. It's just what is the progress? What has the progress looked like for their population numbers and the trajectory of the recent decades?
Okay, so tough question to answer, but historically, let's just put this into context. There were anywhere from 250 to 400,000 blue whales alive on the planet pre-whaling. It just depends who you talk to. You'll get different numbers. The vast majority of them lived in the Southern Ocean. In other words, they spent time in and around Antarctica and the Southern Ocean in general. The whalers concentrated on that species because it was a lot more bang for your buck to get a blue whale than it was to get a much smaller whale. And they decimated those animals from hundreds of thousands. There were there were no way that there were less than 200,000 southern blue whales before whaling, and I personally think there were more, and down to just a few hundred. So we're 99% or more of those southern blue whales were gone. Now, the only subpopulation that really has had any sort of a robust recovery since whaling ended is that Antarctic Southern Ocean population. But the problem is that they are so difficult to encounter, so difficult to have photo identification catalogs of them where we really have a number of good people taking pictures of them and then catalogs that are counting them and following their lives like we do in the Northeast Pacific. And I am a part of that effort. That we know a lot more about them acoustically than we do visually. So how well they're recovering is a matter of conjecture. Whether there are more of them than the probably a bit over 2,000 that live in the Northeast Pacific subpopulation is only a matter of conjecture. It is not proven. There definitely are biologists that believe that that is now the biggest subpopulation left, but they could be very wrong because they don't have proof. And in the Northeast Pacific, we have all kinds of proof as to more or less how many animals are left because there's people studying them in many locations in that subpopulation where they're accessible. And photo identification catalogs are built, and the main one is in Washington State, and they do a great job of keeping track of the whales and keeping track of how many they estimate to be around. So a lot we don't know about the Antarctic blue whale, but we do know, I think the one thing we do know is they have recovered at a certain level from literally almost none that were left at the end of whaling, where in other places in the world, we can't say that in any of the places. They seem to be more or less just sort of holding their own.
Mhm. And yeah, it's very upsetting, and it's also what I definitely feel it's important to inform the general population of is it's also underestimated how much time it takes to recover populations of any animal, of any
Yeah.
multicellular life. I mean, even if you take apart a coral reef, there's still too many people that think it's like grass growing, but it's a
Yeah.
product of millions of years.
Well,
So,
yeah, but the thing to understand is when you begin a growth and it successfully grows from where it was, it's an exponential increase if the habitat is there to, to host more animals. And when you have small numbers of animals, if you have mortality that is caused that keeps that exponential growth from beginning, then you're in big trouble. And in this case, we have that mortality event. We know what it is. It's unintentional ship strikes on blue whales, which are highly susceptible to ship strikes. These are animals that never had a predator, evolved for 20 to 30 million years without really anything to worry about other than finding food and finding mates and moving from one feeding ground to the next. They're too big for orcas to kill. I mean, it happens, but it's very unusual, and it's usually a juvenile or a calf. There is one place in Australia where it seems to tend to happen with adults, and it's just bizarre that it does. But there isn't, it's not really a scientifically accepted predator-prey relationship between orcas and blue whales, where it is with orcas and almost every other species of whale. So ship strikes seem to be taking away the number of whales that would be reproducing and having calves born in a given subpopulation more or less each year, leaving the population more or less flat. And we're not seeing that exponential growth. So our work at Great Whale Conservancy and our Whale Guardians program, our primary work is getting the data on whales, mapping the data out, and seasonally routing ships away from the critical habitat that the whales use, specifically in port regions, but other regions as well, thereby saving lives from these unintentional strikes. And that's what I do. And I think it's as important, if not more important, than any work that's being done with whales anywhere in the world. I mean, there's other very important work, but making sure that they can recover, stopping deaths that are unintentional, very tragic deaths. I don't think there's anything more important than that. If we know that we're succeeding in doing that, and it's not like a maybe. I mean, if we steer the ships away from the whales and they're not in the same place at the same time, there can't be strikes that cause deaths. So that's what I've kind of dedicated the majority of my year to, and I still do a little bit of field research, mostly in Mexico, like I just told you about.
can you go back to your point that you were going to explicate on about Antarctic blue whales being formerly the largest population?
Yeah, because we don't know how many. Remember, they were decimated, right? I told you that there were, at least, in my opinion, a minimum of 200,000 Southern Ocean blue whales before whaling. And then they were down to just a few hundred at the end of whaling. So 99% plus gone from whalers killing them. They biologically, it is believed that they've recovered possibly and probably and maybe to somewhere around 2000, possibly a little bit more, possibly a little bit less. But it's very difficult to prove that for the reasons that I expressed earlier. They're hard to find. We find them acoustically more than we find them physically. So we can't document who this is. Charlie has this kind of pigmentation. Sally has that kind of pigmentation, and so on and so forth. And in California and Mexico, we see Charlie and Sally. We take pictures of them. I know whales in that I've photographed in Mexico. I've worked there for over 30 years. There's individual whales that I recognize the second that I see them and that are in the catalog that I've photographed maybe 20 different years that I've been in Mexico. In Antarctica, that's not happening because nobody's seeing them enough. They're just too hard to find in too difficult of an environment.
Mhm. That's another thing. That's another thing that a lot of people do get wrong about blue whales. I mean, it is proven that they can weigh in the neighborhood of 200 tons. But people do throw that around too easily in nature documentaries and stuff. They talk about it's almost they talk about it like that's the average blue whale weight,
No.
when we've only discovered one specimen
Yeah, the
that
411,000 pound whale that was killed by whalers. So that's 205.5 tons. But, average is much less, obviously.
what is the average? Because I've heard kind of a
Well,
wide
I mean, it's pretty hard to say. The average is more in the Southern Ocean. Southern Ocean blue whales are larger, or Southern Hemisphere blue whales are larger than Northern, just by probably a few feet, 3 or 4 feet, something like that. If I had to say every adult blue whale in the world was put on a scale and you got the weight and then you divided them by the number of whales, I'd say the average is probably going to be 130, 130 to 140 tons, something like that. That
Mhm.
would be my guess. I don't know that anyone could conclusively answer that question, but I think that's got to be very close.
Yeah. And it's also, yeah. And it's also, I'm glad that we're on common ground that it is way too oversimplified to just say that a blue whale weighs 200 tons when,
Well, yeah.
yeah.
People like to extremes and they like to get attention, and blue whales give you attention and certain statistics give you attention as well.
Mhm. And as you've previously listed out individuals, has there been one individual blue whale that has struck the most awe and the most fascination with you or had the biggest impact on your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a whale by the name of White Eyes. White Eyes is one of three names that this whale has because in Mexico, this whale is called Calabasa. And in California, this whale is called Bunny by some people. And then the first biologist who was my mentor, who ever encountered this whale and documented this whale, called the whale White Eyes. So I call it White Eyes. And this whale is exhibits a very strong level of habitat preference. He is a male, and he shows up in a place that I work in every winter in down in Mexico off Baja California. White Eyes, I think in my 32 years of working down there, has shown up maybe about 24 or 25 of those years. He just is, comes to our area every year, and then leaves, and is also quite known off California. I believe the Monterey Bay area is a favorite area of this individual, and it's just spending easily recognizing White Eyes and having all these encounters over the years. Excuse me, with White Eyes. I just kind of feel like I know that whale better than I know any other blue whale. So it's a little bit closer to my heart.
Mhm. So have you had the most numerous experiences with white eyes than any other one
Yes.
in quantity?
Yes.
Mhm. And and then only a couple topics left. Um this is probably I don't like ambiguity, but I feel like this could be a big take. This could have a lot of yield. Um so as you've, been working in close proximity with um virtually all blue whale populations and just innumerable encounters comparatively to almost every other person. Are there any more kind of subtle lessons that you've taken away that you would kind of encourage everyone else in regards to, especially in regards to humanity's ability to destroy ecosystems or even the other way around to rebuild ecosystems, recover them?
Yeah, I mean I think it's actually pretty easy for me to answer that question. So let's look at the blue whale. The blue whale is a baleen whale. It's a very large animal. And when we see it swimming near a dolphin, and in particular, a common dolphin. Dolphins do like to bow ride blue whales, just like they like to bow ride boats. A lot of people that don't spend much time around blue whales wouldn't know that, but it's fun if you're a dolphin to be swimming right in front of the energy that a blue whale pushes as it swims through the water. It's enormous. It's bigger than most boats. So these little dolphins, and with a common dolphin, I think we figured out it takes about 1,500 common dolphins to equal the mass of a blue whale. A common dolphin is a pretty small dolphin. So literally that's the case. But the dolphin is higher on the food chain than the blue whale. The dolphin has teeth. The dolphin eats larger food than the blue whale. The dolphin is higher on the food chain. So this is an animal that is massive, that is actually quite low on the oceanic food chain. And it's not really a dominant animal in its ecosystem with respect to other animals. It's a dominant animal in its impact to the ecosystem, but it's really, in a lot of ways, a very helpless animal. And this is where I'm going in answering your question. So much of what is going on in our environment, both on land and in the oceans, and it's tragic that there are people in high places that won't admit this. So much of it is because of us. So much, so many of the problems and so much of the calamity, so many of the extinctions that have already happened, and the threats of others happening, the alterations to the ecosystems that have evolved over massive periods of time, and what that means for life on Earth, including our lives, is unknown. And I just think the message is there is nothing. Nothing, not your job, not your health care, not your bank account. There is nothing on this planet that is important as taking care of the life support system that allows you to have life in your first place, in the first place. And everyone has one thing in common in this world. There's one thing that's inarguably in common that all human beings have, and that is the next thing that we need. All 8.5 billion of us need the very same thing as the next thing that we need, and that is our next breath of air. Can't argue that one. That's not one you can get up and get a bunch of experts and argue. That's a fact. And that's part of a system that allows us to get that next breath of air. And I do not believe that there's anything more important than caring for that life support system and the entire ecosystem that supports that life support system.
Mhm. Yeah, and we'll get into that at the very end because I love how you did it in the TED Talk, and I just want to give you more time to elucidate on that process. And yeah, and there's reasons to be pessimistic and optimistic. I mean, on the optimism side, the first animal that's ever been taken off the endangered species list was a baleen whale. It was the gray whale. And then, but on the other hand, probably the you could also use a large animal as probably, I think, the clearest example of how we can indirectly cause an animal to go extinct, which is the Steller sea cow. It is just like probably every other endangered or extinct animal. It's oversimplified why it's endangered. People think it's we just hunted them to extinction. But the thing is, we hunted otters too, but it's not that Steller sea cows eat otters. It's that Steller sea cows eat otters. It's that otters feast on sea urchins, which graze against the kelp forests, and kelp is what Steller sea cows rely on for food.
Yeah.
And by almost wiping out otters to extinction, we the Steller sea cow went extinct 30 years after it was empirically discovered in the West. So now on to, I think, the biggest mystery, and I think the biggest fascination of this animal, which is how blue whales give birth. And this is just something I've concluded from my research, and this is totally tentative, totally down to be corrected. But from my research, this is what the numbers look like. So there are 8.5 billion people on the planet. Throughout all of our less than a million years here, about 110 billion people that have ever breathed in air. 24 people have seen the Earth as a tiny sphere. 12 have walked on the moon. And from my research, 2 people have ever seen a blue whale give birth. It's only been documented twice, um, which sounds there's a lot about this animal that's counterintuitive. Like you wouldn't expect an animal to swim as fast as the blue whale, but that's the topic I really want to get into is is what do you make of that almost, like I said, almost counterintuitive reality that we have the largest animal on the planet, but we have so little documentation to witness the most fundamental part of its life.
Well, first of all, I'm not even aware that anyone's ever seen a blue whale give birth. I'm aware of the fact that people have seen blood in the water and, there wasn't a calf there and then there was a calf there and it had fetal folds. And I'm aware of the rare times that that's happened. But actually watching the whale come out of the mother's body, I'm not aware of anyone ever having seen that. And that makes sense because it probably happens below the surface and probably not very far below the surface because the little calf's got to come up for its first breath because they are air breathing mammals, just like we are. Uh, I, I don't know that anyone's ever going to see a blue whale birth unless they happen to have a tag with a camera on it on a whale that happens to point in the direction of a blue whale actually giving birth. Or the other thing that might happen now with drones is that if there's a birth and it's absolutely crystal mirror flat calm on the water, and that whale happens to give birth within 20 or 30 feet of the surface, again, it's going to have to be really calm. A drone might actually pick up that calf emerging from the mom. We do know a bit about these calves that they're born at 22 to 25 feet. They weigh, I believe, 5 to 7 tons at birth, which is mind boggling for most people to comprehend. And they suckle the richest milk on planet Earth, and they gain about 220 pounds every day. So about 7.5 pounds every hour from nursing on the world's richest milk. But, really seeing a blue whale give birth, I also think that due to their very sort of passive nature, they're not aggressive individuals. It is imperative for them that it's not easy to see a birth. It's imperative for them that they do not have a birthing ground like gray whales do or humpbacks do. Because if you know where a blue whale is going to give birth, and they are passive animals. They're not fighters like humpbacks and gray whales, which are fighters if trouble arises. Then, if you're an orca, you're just going to go into the blue whale birthing ground and basically have the mother deliver the calf to you so you can eat it. So, blue whales have to give birth secretly because they don't fight and they're not going to be able to protect their calves from orcas when the calves are first born. Their only defense is they're very fast and they can outrun orcas, but not with a newborn calf. They can't.
That's kind of mind blowing, to be honest. It's because I'm honestly kind of speechless because I was hoping there'd be some kind of optimism of us witnessing a blue whale birth someday, but not only does it not look like that will happen, it doesn't even seem like that's the right thing to do.
It's not. It's the blue whale needs to give birth. So in other words, let's say, here's another way of putting it. A lot of people think you can buy anything with money. Okay, that's just the way that they think, especially people in certain parts of the world, unmentioned at this point. So let's say that somebody gave a bunch of experts $1 billion and said, I want you to film a blue whale giving birth. Okay, well, here's the first problem. The first problem is it is in the interest of the blue whale that they don't have a birthing ground. So right off the bat with your $1 billion, you can't go to any specific location and say, okay, I know they give birth more or less at this time of the year because we see calves when we see them and they're pretty small at this time of the year, and we can presume, from their size that, this is the time of the year they give birth. In the northern hemisphere, it seems that it's kind of an October, November, possibly December birthing period. But there is no birthing area because the blue whales can't have a birthing area. So now you have to go to a region where you know that they give birth. And I know in the Northeast Pacific population where, I'm pretty sure where the region is that they give birth. And then what are you going to do? How are you going to find a birth with that money? What is your mechanism for doing it? I don't think you could do it. I don't think if that's all you were doing with your $1 billion, and the person that was giving you the $1 billion basically said you better succeed or big trouble. I think failure is almost guaranteed.
Wow.
You can't buy an image or an experience of a blue whale birth. You can only show up in rough seas, most likely, and try to use some equipment and get lucky. That's about all you could do.
Mhm. But now with this newfound knowledge that it's entirely on purpose, presumably entirely intentional to make it very difficult for any other species to witness the birth, it's not the right thing to do, probably, you
Yeah,
know.
one in particular. I mean, this is about orcas. Orcas have a pretty big influence on the natural history of most whales, if not all whales. Their relationship to orcas has structured a lot of their evolutionary history, and when what we see now is who they've become from many evolutionary factors, but orcas are definitely one of them.
Mhm. And
They're a da-
and I've also gathered that it's just as mysterious on their mating grounds.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's ever seen blue whales mate. I think that they've seen penises, and I think they've seen courting,
Mhm.
and I think that they've seen certainly males fighting to gain access to females, and they might have seen uh, things between blue whales that were very close to mating and maybe happened right before a male and a female dove, and 5 minutes later they mated. I believe that that's probably happened, but that anyone's actually seen them mating, never even heard anyone claim that they saw them mating. I think how they mate down below the surface. How are you going to see that?
It's um it's just interesting that you've used the word court. Do we know whether or not they're, I mean, obviously we don't know anything about their sexual life, their mating life. Um, or if it's not even anything about the blue whale, about baleen. Do we know if they're polyamorous or monogamous? Because I
No,
know.
they're definitely not. No, 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 no. No, the male is just gone, has nothing to do with it. And in ensuing years, different males will father calves.
They're not, sorry, they're not polyamorous or monogamous.
They're not monogamous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just funny that you use the word court, and I know monogamy, where
Well,
we're in
yeah,
the very
court
community of mammals.
court is an individual trying or a group of individuals trying and fighting, males, in other words. And yes, I've seen that hundreds of times where there's a presumable male tracking a presumable female. In some cases, we know from genetic work that's been done on those individuals that it's a male tracking a female swimming sort of behind her and off to the side. I've seen it hundreds of times, but I haven't, and I've seen females swat the water when that's happening. I've seen tails fly up in the air and water go 50 feet in the air and pectorals come out of the water and things, and I can guess as to what's happening. And maybe in fact they mated 5 minutes later. I think in a lot of cases the females were telling the males to get lost, because we typically follow and see what's happening, and often when the female has a reaction like that, we don't see them together. The next time they come to the surface, we don't see them near each other. So, it's most of it, just remember, most of what goes on happens below the surface. So in effect, we can talk about whales maybe a little bit like snow leopards. Okay. Land animals are much easier to study, but snow leopards you can't find. They're very hard to find. Well, whales you can find, but you only see them for a minimal amount of the time that they're around you, and they really do most of what they do below the surface. So even when you're with them, you don't really know exactly what's going on below the surface.
They don't even really, they don't even really breach, do they?
I've seen it, but it's rare.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's yeah, that I'm really glad we got to talk on that because that I honestly think that kind of challenges how much of the world do we really know and how human, how do I say this? It challenges how human exceptionalistic the world is. People boast all the time about, we've walked on the moon, the printing press. Um, but, we can't, there's so much of the basics we still haven't done. And to me, that's always been the most striking example. The largest animal, the most visible animal, the heaviest animal. Um, and, should have, um, I should have prefaced that the two people that I came across was very much with a grain of salt, but in all likelihood, nobody has seen a blue whale give birth. I mean, it's
Will
to me,
actually give birth, but I'm quite sure because I've read about it that they have seen possibly even an umbilical cord. They've seen blood in the water, and they've seen a calf come up to breathe when there wasn't a calf there before. And if you see blood in the water and a little calf come up to breathe and all these fetal folds on its body, you're seeing, the first or second or third breath that this whale has ever taken. But if you haven't seen the whale emerge from the body and observe how that happens. We know it's tail first, but how that happens, and how long it takes, and what sort of struggle there may or may not be in that instance, that you do get to see it. And have you seen a birth? Well, very close, but you haven't. If you
Mhm.
don't see the calf emerge from the mom, you haven't seen the birth. You have seen just after the birth. Let's be correct about that.
Yeah. And the last big question, and I'm very excited to ask you this, because I feel this could be very insightful. You did talk about this in pretty good detail on the TED Talk. It was kind of the concluding point. But the difference between this podcast and a TED Talk is a TED Talk puts you on a very strict time limit. And I don't want to give you any time limit because I feel this is absolutely paramount to helping us appreciate and giving us a sense of urgency to protect blue whales. So I want to give you all the time you need on really elaborating on the process of how the quality of a blue whale's diet directly dictates the quality of the air that we breathe in and out. I want you to take all the time you need for this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to need a lot of time, and actually have limited time left, but this is pretty simple. So let's go through this with the listeners step by step so we can follow. The world, the Earth, is 70% ocean. It's 29% land. These are rounded figures, and it's about 1% fresh water. On land, uh, vegetation cover, forest cover, tree cover occurs on about 30 to 31% of the land on the earth. So that's 30 to 31% of the 29% of our planet that's land. And that makes sense because there's ice and there's deserts and there's agriculture. So it makes sense that a little bit less than one third of land is covered by forest. Okay, how do we get air? How do we get oxygen on this planet? Well, the primary method of getting oxygen on this planet is something called photosynthesis. We all learned this in school when we were younger. And we learned that the primary method of photosynthesis is done by vegetation on land, trees in particular. They, the leaves in the trees, effectively, to simplify the process, breathe in carbon dioxide, exhale oxygen. So they use the carbon dioxide to grow, produce sugars with sunlight and grow. And the byproduct of the photosynthesis is that oxygen is released. And that is actually how we have oxygen in the atmosphere. Originally, the Earth was not oxygenated. And it changed from photosynthesis, to put it simply, into a more oxygen-based atmosphere that's the one we live in now. Now, we are comparing vegetation on land that is 30% of 29% of our planet to an ocean that actually also produces a plant algae-like life form that is very, it's not the same as leaves, but it's a plant algae-like life form. And it grows by photosynthesis, the exact same process that the leaves and the vegetation in the trees use on land. Now, this happens in a large portion of 70% of our planet. And the name of this type of life is phytoplankton. And phytoplankton isn't the same thing as an oak leaf or a maple leaf. Phytoplankton is actually a lot of different kinds of plant algae-like life forms that photosynthesize in the ocean. And they photosynthesize in mass, in totality, more than all of the vegetation does on land. So let's leave it at that because this is something that can go on for an hour with this conversation. We have more photosynthesis pulling more carbon out of the atmosphere, which, by the way, we need to do because of our changing climate, and putting more oxygen into the atmosphere by the oceans than we do by land. So now all we have to do is look at how does phytoplankton bloom or come to exist in the ocean in the vast, massive blooms and quantities that it does. And it is by a combination of upwelling nutrients from the bottom of the ocean, seasonal upwelling nutrients, mixing with specific minerals, most specifically phosphorus, iron, and nitrogen. Those are the missing minerals. And one of the primary deliverers of those minerals into the upper level of the ocean, which is the only place that light phytoplankton can bloom in the light part of the ocean, is the feces or the poop of whales. It is chock full of the minerals that are needed for phytoplankton to bloom, chock full of the minerals that are needed to mix with the upwelling nutrients for phytoplankton to bloom. So when a blue whale migrates to an area that its next known feeding ground is going to be in seasonally, because it's been that way for millions of years, it's actually going to a part of the ocean where it knows that seasonally there's going to be a rich upwelling of nutrients. And among the number of things that deliver the essential minerals to those nutrients, the whales are actually playing a very important role in that. They're pooping, and their poop is mixing with those nutrients, and phytoplankton is blooming. The phytoplankton is eaten by the smallest animals in the ocean. That's their job, zooplankton. And the zooplankton is eaten by krill, and the whales eat the krill. And then what happens when the whales eat the krill? They poop and they stimulate more phytoplankton to bloom. Zooplankton eat that, krill eat that, the whales eat that, more poop. And it's actually a pump. It's a circular process and it has a name. It's called the whale pump. So we need more whales in the ocean to stimulate more phytoplankton to make the ocean more productive, because not only does phytoplankton lead to krill that feeds the whales, phytoplankton is the base of the entire oceanic food chain. So if you love an animal, if you're listening and you love an animal in the ocean, name that animal. It's not there without phytoplankton. It has nothing to eat in the ocean without phytoplankton. We need more whales to pull more carbon out of the atmosphere, to pull more put more oxygen up in the atmosphere to feed the oceanic food chain that feeds even the fish that over 1 billion humans eat regularly, their main source of protein. So this is a very, very important thing. And I would encourage our listeners, if they don't remember this, to simply go on the internet and look up the whale pump. They will see the whale pump is very simple. They'll read about it. It will refresh their memories and they'll understand a little bit more about the importance of the oceans, where life started on our planet, and the importance of the decimated whale numbers that we need to bring back to enrich our oceans, pull more carbon out of the atmosphere, put more oxygen up into the atmosphere, and create more fish, more food, and more life in the oceans for a more robust and healthy planet.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for tuning in. And I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude to you, Michael Fischbach. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yep, my pleasure. Great to be with you all.
All right. Thank you. Okay, let's see.
All right, so I